Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Will everyone join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, first up we have several minutes to approve. So first minutes are from the June 18th meeting.
I'll make the motion.
Second. We have a motion second. Any further discussion on those? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those are carried. Next we have the minutes from the July 2nd reorganizational meeting, regular business meeting. Move it.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on those? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And finally, we have the approval of the minutes for the August 6th meeting.
I'll make the motion.
The motion second. Any further discussion on those?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those minutes are approved. Next on the agenda, we have the approval of the CSE, CPSE recommendations. We have a motion to approve those.
Make a motion.
Second.
Motion second. We have no discussion on these unless it's an exec, so no discussion. We can approve those by signifying by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those recommendations are approved. Okay, next we have Mike Rulo here from BOCES, and welcome, and we want you to give a presentation to the full board. You met with Tammy and myself last week to discuss the process. It's very similar to the last process we went through, so I thought that process was engaging, and we'll let them give a presentation to us. So welcome, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Good to see you again. Good to be here. I am Mike Rulo, for those of us that haven't met, and I'm the District Superintendent, DCM of BOCES. It's a pleasure to be here. Dr. McDonald, congratulations on your impending retirement. I know you have a whole school year to go, but certainly well earned. And
A lot of last firsts.
That's right, for sure. It'll be a nice, quiet, smooth year for you, I promise.
Nice promise.
Of course. So just kind of walk you through the process and the timeline, just plant some seeds for some of the things and some of the work tasks that we will most certainly need to come back to at points throughout the process. So each of you do have a folder with a whole bunch of different pieces of literature in there. The very first thing on the right-hand side was a PowerPoint, which will go right along. I only have 11 slides. I promise it won't take too long. But we can just talk about some of the decision making that you all need to do as a board, just to really set the process up. And then once we're able to do that and get the position advertised, you're really comfortable with what the brochure looks like and how we're going to market Walton and the position, then we can really get things moving. And we play a little bit of a waiting game. I'll talk about this a little bit more in a few minutes. And then things will kind of move along nicely. So ask questions if you have them as I'm talking. It's really important that you have a thorough understanding of really what you're signed up for by virtue of being on the board and having to navigate a superintendent search on behalf of your district. And so that very first piece, there is no decision, in my humble opinion, that is more important for a Board of Education than hiring a superintendent. It's a critical piece of the puzzle, as you know, having had the opportunity to work with somebody like Dr. McDonald, and it's really, really important. So it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take some energy, certainly some thought and deliberation, but I think this is a process that will work well for your district and will result in having a new outstanding leader to serve as your superintendent of schools. I'm very, very pleased to be here, and being able to support the Walton School District. So just some matters for consideration, really in no particular order, but again, some of those high-level big pieces of the puzzle that you'll all need to wrestle with. And we're just going to jump in kind of full tilt here. The first piece is whether you want to conduct an open or a closed search, right? And there are pros and cons to both of those systems. There's a one-pager inside your folder. It was on the right-hand side, right behind the PowerPoint. It really highlights those important pieces. It might be tucked behind your PowerPoint. There it is.
Yep.
And that's not something we need to decide right in this moment necessarily, but great, and if, we'll kind of work through this however it works well for you and the board.
To be honest with you, if you have time in your presentation right now, on some of these bigger level items, I think we can check off with consensus by people nodding your heads. The last time we did an open search, and I believe that open interview process with confidentiality until your finalists are there, was how we did it last time. I think that probably is our best bang for our buck. And if everyone is good with that, we can start checking off some of these boxes for them, either right now at the table during discussion, or if it's something that we're not familiar with or you want more time on, we can pause. But if you would like us to have feedback tonight on some of those items to get building, that's if you're accepted as our under.
Yeah,
proof of
I'm
that
gonna speak like that's going to happen. If it doesn't, I won't be offended. But it's just easier to talk in the affirmative, right? Without a doubt.
We're good with that.
And so so the open versus the closed. Open is just a lot of involvement by community stakeholders, right? It's a bit of a more timely process. It's more transparent, however. And as you can see from this one pager, it's really just about that transparency and that community input. The cons of that are reduced confidentiality, which often can limit the candidate pool, right? There's really kind of no safety for folks. And so what we've been seeing and across the state, and interestingly, there was just an article in the Rochester newspaper about this very topic. And there's been a trend across the state to go to more confidential searches to increase candidate pool, just for the sake of like the safety that the individuals are able to enjoy through most of the process. And so there can be sometimes like you're in the grocery store at the gas station and somebody's trying to get your ear around, hey, this candidate or that candidate, because it's kind of right out there, right? So that's some of that political influence that can be a little bit challenging sometimes with an open process. And as I said before, it tends to be more time consuming. You have the luxury of time because you're starting so early in the school year, and assuming that we get a great slate of candidates with the first posting and we don't have to go out for a second posting, you have the luxury of time. So I'm not sure that that's really a critical factor here. With that closed process, as I've already alluded to, that confidentiality is really, really important for many, many people right now. It is much more efficient and leads to more of a merit-based selection process.
Quick one for you. You do a hybrid.
Yeah.
Because you have a hybrid where we can start out closed and then go to, okay.
Yeah.
So I apologize because I already jumped ahead, but what we did last time was a hybrid approach. So it was a close, so everyone had the comfort of applying, internal, external candidates. Everybody in the world has a comfort of the confidentiality of applying for the position. Once you get to finalists, and I don't want to take away your presentation, but once you get to finalists, it's really impossible if you're going to have a question and answering session. We want the community to have the input in the process like we did last time. The way we did it last time with that hybrid is when we got to the final candidates, there's a question and answer session and then a quick feedback session to the board the night of that decision-making process from your community, from your stakeholders, from your teaching staff, things like that. So that process I would like to be able to duplicate, and what he's laying out to us is exactly what we went through last time. And I thought that if you have to go through this process, would be the way to handle it.
And as I discussed last week, when I was here, that's really worked well in the searches that I've done. We've done a blended model, and not to be too repetitive here, but we've kept it confidential until the end. And then the community gets to see some bios on the two finalists. We invite folks in for a listening session. They get to provide feedback to you for your consideration as you're making a final selection. and it's worked really, really well. And so the format of that forum, what it's been so far, and again, it's worked well, is there's been about 20 minutes of presentation by each finalist, where they just give an overview of, here's who I am, right? Here's what you can expect from me as your next superintendent. Usually do a little bit of an overview of their entry plan. We spend about 20 minutes with live Q&A. I've served as the moderator, and again, public is there just to listen, and the public selects the questions that they want to hear answers to from the candidates. So we push out a survey prior to that session, and then just really by popular demand, right? What are the questions that we want to ask? And we also make sure that we reflect the questions of interest from the different constituent groups, right? So teachers, staff, parents, right? Community members at large. And then we've given about 10 minutes is usually all the public that's there usually needs to provide some feedback for the board. So we're done within about an hour for each candidate and move through that process rather seamlessly. So that's a really big decision for you all to make, because we need to advertise in the brochure what can somebody expect, because some folks will say, I'm not going to apply if it's this type of format, right? Whereas if it's closed or haven't had any pushback from people on the hybrid. And we've had language and this is in a different packet, not to necessarily ask you to flip through, but the initial search for candidates will be closed. However, finalists will be expected to provide a community presentation. So they know, right, that it's going to be put out there. Then when I interface with people, I tell them, like, this is step by step, this is exactly what you can expect and what you're going to need to be ready to do. Okay.
So if everyone's comfortable with that, I think that's the way we lean. We can tweak it later, but, get into the details of it. But I think generally, I think with a nodding of heads, that's where we want to head, in my opinion.
Yes. If you end up with 20 candidates, you don't want the community trying to separate that down. We need to have a way that the board separates that down to a smaller group and then have the community input.
Can I just ask, what, based on your experience, how many candidates are typical for a district to apply for a hybrid process?
So we've had as many, and this is over the last year and a half, right? And so this will be I think the 6th search in the last year and a half. 2 other districts that we haven't had to do a search. But at any rate, we've had as many as about 9 and as few as 3. And as you might know, Hancock had to go out a second time, and that second time yielded three potential candidates. So, and they found a great person. You just need this many, right? To this many good ones, one good one, right? And then it's always viability as well, right? So that's where we've been. Which honestly, again, and speaking with my colleagues, if you're getting 7, 8, 9, 10, you're doing pretty good. It's a tough market. Starting to rebound a little bit. We've seen even in Otselic Valley, so small, nobody's gonna apply there, right? That was the most recent one that I completed with that district. They had a solid candidate pool, without a doubt, and then a few people that missed the deadline, but that's a whole other story. So, answer your question.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll need to decide on advertisement options, although there's not really a lot of decision making here. It's just at some point the board authorizing that you're going to spend a little bit of money to advertise. There's a couple of documents in your folder as well. 2 places I would suggest you want to hit is using NSBA. They will blast that out digitally, and the NSBA cost I think is it's $185. You get like a 30-day posting with NSBA. And then NISCUS, the New York State Council of School Superintendents, again, they have a great job board digital. That's a little bit more expensive, and I think you get it like 45 days. It's on the document for $330. So for a little over $500, you're going to hit those two services, which are great. People looking for superintendencies in New York State are going to use them. We also, post on your website. We'll post it on our website at DCMO BOCES. And then I'll push it out through my district superintendent listserv. So that will go to every single, all other 36 DSs in New York State, and then they push it out to their component supers, right? Those component supers usually, maybe there's a sitting superintendent that's looking for a change, or they know who's ready right? Who the administrators are in their district that are ready to maybe try to get a superintendency. And so I think we'll have really good coverage if we do those things. And so at some point, again, just we'll need some authorization to, spend a little bit of money with NISBA and NISCUS, because my assistant, Dory, you'll hear me use her name a lot. She'll be working with Corey quite a bit, but she'll coordinate all of that with NISBA and NISCUS. Okay. And again, this is just one of those, I know everybody has lives outside of your highly paid role as a board member, but it's really important to the extent that you can be here for this process. 100% of the time is ideal, right? And so we'll just work hard to coordinate schedules and make sure that that people can be here, but we all understand things come up. It's just hard to feel like you have all the information you need to be able to advocate, and for that candidate you think is best for Walton if you're not here. And again, just know that the board announcements that Corey puts out in the agendas, we want the public to know what work you're doing as a board through this process. We'll be public as much as we can be. There will be times when we'll need to work in an executive session. But to the extent that we can be in an open session, we'll absolutely be in the open session to do this work. Some of your responsibilities, and I certainly won't read this word for word, but I do want to impress upon you, you will make all the decisions as a board in this process. You will see all of the candidates. You will see all of the paper. I don't feel as though it's my role to sort and select who I think you should have access to, right? And there's a difference of opinion in terms of how consultants handle that. I'll put up some guardrails. If I know something about a candidate, you're going to know, right? I'll tell you. You can make a decision whether you want to bring that person in or not, but you'll have all the information. But this board will make all the decisions through this process as to who you're going to bring in to interview, right? The kinds of questions you're going to ask, and then obviously who progresses through the process, right? There's some work to do to approve a search consultant. I hope it's me. I'm happy for it to be me because I certainly want to build relationship. Not only with you, but also with the successful candidate. And I think that, never thought I'd do this many searches coming in this role, a solid year and a half, but pretty quickly gotten, I think, decent at it. We've had good outcomes in the other districts so far. As I said, you'll decide the format for the search process. You're going to decide the characteristics that are critical for the next superintendent, but we're going to invite your community to participate in that process as well. We've got a great survey instrument and a couple of different options for how we push that out. That just gives some feedback of the types of things, the types of characteristics that people are interested in, all right, in their next superintendent. Now, then you can use that however you wish. You can use that in the generation of the questions that you ask, right? And obviously, when you're meeting with folks, you're going to screen for these things, either formally or informally. You're going to make a decision on the approval of a salary range. All right, and then we're going to want to put that in the brochure. And obviously, you're going to approve that brochure and application, and we'll get into timeline in just a few minutes. There is a document, it was on the left-hand side of the folder, that has the current salaries, and this was right from the SED website, of all of the 16 superintendents and DCMO BOCES. And then I just grabbed a few kind of in the immediate area, if you will, in the ONC BOCES, and a couple of the outliers in the Broomtagga BOCES as well. I didn't get into duration. That kind of sort of seems to be a little bit irrelevant now, right? You can see a superintendent that's been in the seat for 6, 7, 8 years. Newbies are coming in and making almost the same money because it's the only way for districts to attract people, right? Certainly gives the sitting super some fodder for their boards, but that's a conversation for a different day in a different district, right? So you can see some data there. In terms of where people are, it's for the most part really clustered across the region. There's not, with a couple of exceptions, there's not much disparity amongst those salaries. And again, that's not even considering length of time in the chair.
Is there a strong correlation with the enrollment numbers in the district?
Not so much.
Doesn't look it.
Not so much.
No, I'm looking at schools.
No. No.
How about when it comes to your, this is kind of a foolish question in one aspect, when it comes to your salary range versus your candidate pool? Obviously, the more salary, the better the candidate pool.
It will absolutely have an impact.
There's got to be is there a happy range though? I mean,
Yeah, I think there is. I'll give you a couple of examples. And so, I shadowed Alan Pohl with the Hancock search. Right when I was coming into the role, he picked up that search. And that was the second time that they went out. First time they had 0 candidates. So they bumped the salary in Hancock from to 150 to 160 for a 300 student school district, right? That changed it, and the candidates told us that, right? Same thing, same thing even in Green. We saw some candidates, and the sitting super there is currently, she just started a couple weeks ago. She's out of the Syracuse area, and they went 150 to 165, if I remember correctly, in their range, right? First superintendency for that person, and the individual that left was barely in that range, right? But that's what they had to do to attract, and didn't want to have to go out a second time, right? And they just said, hey, here's where the market is right now, so we're gonna give ourselves a little bit of a buffer, but we're also not going to prohibit folks from applying because they think it's too low.
One of the things that I'd like your feedback on, it's my opinion, is I would not want to entertain a superintendent that was a split school scenario. I think we're big enough where we need a dedicated superintendent, and me personally, I'm not interested in having someone say, hey, we can team up with superintendent over 2 schools. I've seen that in other districts, and I personally, I don't like it. I would rather have a dedicated superintendent here. If everyone's comfortable with that, I'd also like to put that direction out there that we're not interested in sharing a superintendent with anybody. You guys, everyone comfortable with that, or?
I don't disagree with you.
No.
We're big enough.
Need
that-
focus.
I mean, admin, you guys should have opinions too, but in my opinion, like, you need a dedicated person. You can't have a split role. So that's definite.
Unless you're really sick of spending the time there.
First time around.
Have a sense of what you think you want the salary range to be, or do you want to?
I think give us a chance to discuss it a little bit.
Fair.
I don't think any of us had our head in the sand that we're gonna get away with a really cheap superintendent, but then, we bumped up the ranges pretty good in our last hire. And I think we just have to look at the real data on what's around us and try to get our mind around it, and then I think we need to snap a range that's above it, our comfort level, and just below our comfort level, and then let any and all candidates come in and wherever they think they land on, and then we can discuss that under contract terms. Great. But I mean, we're not, the days of a cheap superintendent, they're not, it isn't real, so you have to be in the market.
Do you feel that the range locally is attractive to, say, assistant superintendents in larger districts that we would be drawing from other regions, or is it?
I'm sorry, should I let you finish? No, probably not, because many of them are, and Mike, please, I know it's awkward when you're the outgoing person, right, and don't want to say much, but, value your opinion. So you're coming out of like the Binghamton area, it might be for some of the smaller district assistant soups, it might be attractive, right? You're not too far away, and they're probably in that 125 to 140 range, so maybe out of the Syracuse area, probably not, right? And then when you start pushing downstate a little bit, I mean, you can see that on here, even with in Andy's, a Margaretville superintendent, that's a pretty good salary for some tiny districts, but as you all know, once you start getting down into the Catskills, it's a whole different ballgame. So, did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is the data available that we can look it up?
It is. It's right on the state website.
Okay.
So every school district is required to submit their superintendent, and then there's a threshold for other types of roles as well. And so it's updated annually. So the 24-25 data is right out there.
Okay.
Yeah, happy to provide the link so you can kind of surf through it. You drive yourself crazy a little bit looking at it, but it at least gives you a sense of what the real numbers are.
That'd be helpful for me.
For sure.
When you asked about the student population versus salaries, that was one school that came to mind. I looked at it and went, no,
Right.
that's not even close.
No, it
There's
really
no correlation at all.
It really used to. It definitely used to be.
Yeah.
Right. And it just doesn't seem to be the case anymore. That right-hand column that I didn't put a column header in there. Those are the searches that have been done in the last year and a half in the DCMO BOCES, and those were the ranges that the districts went out with. And so again, to the point of the conversation, you can see really that district size wasn't necessarily a predictor for what you needed to, what the districts needed to put out there in order to recruit a solid candidate pool.
The ranges that you have here, though, do you know the pool number for those districts?
How many people applied?
Yes.
Yeah, so Franklin was 3. You're gonna really test my memory now. I don't wanna give you bad numbers, so.
I mean, that's
You can-
something you
if
need
you
to get
can
back to.
follow,
So
it was
I
all-
just-
have Dory or somebody.
I will, and
If you're
it was
selected.
somewhere in that, like I said, in that 3 to 9, that 3 to 9 range.
I guess-
Is where they were there.
Not to, I'm sorry. Where I'm going with that was just the conversation, I had a question I asked you before on the salary range. To have localized numbers to go with these ranges to see just what the impact was locally. I mean, if the 130 to 145, it was 3 people, but the 150 to 160 was 9 people, that's, to me, relevant information to know where do I want to start and where I don't. I mean, I'm just kind of as a district.
Sure.
That's why I'm.
How much affects the timing of when you're posting this affect that number? If you're
Yeah.
like posting the beginning of the school year, you're getting more than compared to the middle of the
So
school
I
year?
think
or-
it's all of those
It's-
variables.
it's all variable.
So what I think you'll find is that it's all over the place.
Okay.
Right? Like I'll tell you, I know Oxford was a very small number of applicants, right? And so, but they had a pretty healthy range there, right? Their top end, I believe, their top end was higher than anybody else. So I think
Okay.
it had to do with some of the timing.
The timing.
Right? It had to do with the district, the location, and, right, and just where people were in that search cycle. So there's a lot of variables. And you know, I think it's worth stating that, you know, there used to be a school of thought that, like, right now it's not the time to go, it's not a normal search cycle for superintendents, right? They kind of look at springtime and then transition with that July 1 was the old, throw it out the window, right? Again, long-sitting consultants in New York State would say there is no right time to start a search. The time is when you need to start, right? Because people are looking, and I can tell you in Green, they appointed their superintendent in early March. They had the process wrapped up. They started about the same time you are. Enjoyed the luxury of time, didn't drive people crazy through the holidays, and had a decision made, you know, in the wintertime, and did the appointment almost at their leisure, right, in March. And then that gave a lot of transition time behind the scenes for that new super to get the lay of the land, informally participate in the budget process, some of the hiring, and she was ready to hit the ground running on July 8th when she started, right? So, you know, so it's all these traditional type things. I think, you know, whether it's post-pandemic or just the nature of employment right now in just about every market sector, right? It's just really challenging. And so you got to go out there and be aggressive and try to get the very best people you can, right? And money talks. So, couple other responsibilities, just approving that advertising campaign. As I said, we'll set the schedule. You'll set the schedule for the process. I have a draft schedule we'll review in a few minutes, and then we can decide on some dates as we move through this. We're going to want to discuss residency options, right? Sometimes districts say, got to live in our school district. Again, I'm guessing you're not going to say that, because if you're going to go with a confidential process from the outset, you wouldn't want to limit your candidate pool by saying you have to live within the district boundaries. What districts have been doing in our region right now is saying residency is not a requirement. However, visibility, regular visibility at school events is expected. And so you make it very clear that we understand that you might not live in the Walton district. However, we believe, right, that being present and a participant in our school community is an important part of being a new superintendent here, right? Assuming too that it's somebody from outside of the community, just right, then that becomes even more important, right? So how do you learn about us, right? How do you really become a part of our school culture if you're not here all the time? So That's something that you're going to want to be clear on as a board, like put that right in the brochure, right? Because that's something that that potential candidates are looking for. You're going to select the candidates for interviews. You're going to select the finalists. You're ultimately obviously going to select that new superintendent. You're going to have input on what the contract looks like for that new superintendent, and you know, be some work with your attorney on this as well. But at the end of the day, it's just going to be lots of time and deliberation, and hopefully an enjoyable process that begins some relationship building with your new super, and you'll know that you'll have a great member of your governance team to start on July 1. Some of the things that I will do, I'm going to work to support you in every aspect of the search, including some draft communications that you can use. And Grady, you can send them on behalf of the board. It can be the entire board, right? Work with Corey to push these things out through your normal communication channels. It will be important at periodic times to provide some updates to your school community, right? Because, you know, people just get a little scratchy when they don't know what's going on. Is anything happening? We haven't heard anything in a while. It's especially important with a confidential process. I also think with those survey tools that it helps to keep people hooked in at some regular intervals. But you know, people want to be in the know, especially with somebody, you know, a role that's as visible as the superintendency is. I'm going to work with you to establish a selection process timeline. We know July 1 is that target date, maybe with some transition time. I'll work with you to develop candidate criteria. We'll prepare the materials for advertising the position using my public information team, your team internally here, right? Dr. McDonald, probably the administrative team, Corey, whoever else you want to pull in is going to have a lot of input on what's the right language. Meg, certainly on the financials, right? What's the right language that we want in our brochure? And by the way, as you probably noticed, this was a version of the most recent from 2020, just to give you a sense of what did we put out the last time that we went through this process. I will collect and prepare information to provide to the candidates. So at some point, I'll push out, it's a very simple 3-question questionnaire for you all that you can individually submit back. And candidates, when I sit with potentials, and I might get some phone calls from people before they push paper and say, can you tell me about the district? What's the board looking for in their next superintendent, right? Are there any capital projects in the works? You know, what's the budget vote then? What do you know about the board? You know, those kinds of things. And so to the extent that I can get some firsthand information, right? Some of that visioning, where do they see the district going the next 3 years, right? Same, you know, with your permission to sit with Dr. McDonald and learn some things from his perspective, right? He's in the know. And that can be shared out with potential candidates, can be really, really helpful. I will do preliminary screening interviews of candidates for this reason, right? I want to verify what's in their paper that they submit. I also want to be able to bring that paper to life when I sit with you. You're reviewing, you know, a whole bunch of pieces of paper, and you got some questions about what they say about this, what they say about that. Hopefully I'll have the answer for you on those things, right? But just try to bring those candidates to life for you so that you have a clear sense of who you might be meeting should you choose to bring those individuals in for a first-round interview. I'll help you develop the interview questions. Not that they have to be my questions, just try to get the ball rolling, right? I promise that there will be some things that each of you individually are very much interested in, and I would tell you to bring those to the table, and we'll put them in a document. We'll be well-prepared, well-oiled machine, hopefully, for those interviews. You just need to show up. I'll even bring pencils or pens for you if you'd like, and help you do the work, right? Help you with a decision on those candidates to bring back for final interviews and just kind of working through some process. I think you'll know probably pretty clearly who the right people are initially to narrow, and then who that right person is to be your next superintendent. And again, really just all that support that you might need as a board to help you navigate this process. I will do reference checking on the candidates. It really should only be done by the search consultant. It's not something that you should expect to do or that you would want to get involved in. And in fact, it can really take a search off the rails if individual board members or anybody else for that matter that knows a potential candidate starts digging in on people. Not something that you really want to do. I want to be clear though, with a closed search, I will not do reference checking until people are coming to be finalists, right? For obvious reasons. We can't tell them it's confidential and then start ringing the phone and the doorbell for people, right? So that kind of can be a little unsettling sometimes for some board members because like, wait, I'm spending time bringing this person in. What if we find something out that, if we know things up front, then we'll put it out there. Just kind of depends on who pushes paper for the position. So we'll see a lot of each other here in the next several weeks to a month. It really is a matter of how aggressively you want to fine-tune the brochure so that we can get it pushed out. That will kind of dictate how much time we spend together in the next several weeks. And I know it's kind of tough with the opening of school and the like to have people kind of stop doing what they're doing in the next really week and a half before school opens to begin populating a brochure, right? So we'll have to be a little bit sensitive to that, I think. Again, this is a lot of repetition for a reason. All the things that we've already talked about are things that we need to get after here as quickly as possible. Notice I have the duration of posting about 4 to 6 weeks, probably no shorter than 4 weeks, no longer than 6. Most people, for whatever reason, wait till the last week to send things in. So I don't know if there's anything gained by waiting, but I do think that we want to give it enough time to let the dust settle on the start of a school year and make sure that we're getting a good pool of applicants.
So with that, you would probably be October to give time for people to get in their rhythm of the school back in session and going.
Yeah, probably late October, and we'll take a look at the calendar in just a few minutes. And that's about where we are. We can move it in whatever way that you think might be the most beneficial. But that would be my recommendation. So once we get the brochure out, we give that wait time of 4 to 6 weeks. I'll get all the applications in my office, either hard copy or via email, sometimes both. I'll do those initial screenings, and then I'll meet with you all, and we'll look at the paper. We'll select candidates to interview. We'll set a schedule for when we're going to bring these folks in. Then you're going to select candidates for final interviews, right? So we'll work through each step of the way. I'm trying not to get too far ahead of ourselves and make things muddy. Each step of the way, we'll work through what's that next step in the process and how do we change the questions for initial interviews versus finalists, right? Are we having a dinner? What time are we coming in? We'll hammer all those things out. And I think we kind of talked tentatively, great. Having a dinner with folks is a really nice opportunity with those finalists, right?
And one of the things I thought is I would have the dinner here. I'm not interested in going out in public because then you're going to get more people saying, oh, I can see they sat with this person, that person. I mean, just bring them in here, ask questions, give everybody the same format, right? And go from that. If we are all in agreement that we do a dinner, my suggestion would be to have it catered here so that it was, again, part of that whole, just trying to keep it close for the candidate and as long as we can.
And I'll tell you, if you haven't been through this process before, when you're sitting having a meal and casual conversation with folks, you'll learn a lot about them. Right? It's just different than just the firing squad of question answer and the technical. You would hope if somebody thinks at least that they're ready to be a superintendent, they're going to have the technical. They're going to be able to talk school, right? But you want to know what makes this person tick, right? Who are they underneath all that stuff? And you can get at that just an hour and a half. It'll move pretty quickly when you're in here and having it catered. You're not waiting for a server and schlepping things to and from the table, right? But it's a really nice opportunity. It's fascinating to participate and then just to kind of watch how things unfold.
Well, you don't get interrupted either. You don't get interrupted by anybody from the outside.
That's right. Exactly.
I want to reiterate again, our candidate search, we keep talking about people outside the district and all that. This is going to be open internally, externally, anybody, and the best candidate's going to be our finalist, period. But I just want to make it clear, this is going to be wide open.
Right.
We're not doing only down this road or only down that road. This is going to be a broad search. If there's internal candidates, if there's external candidates,
Right.
bring them all to the table, and make sure we pick the best finalists, period. That's what our job is, so I just wanna make sure that's clear. You know, we're talking about people outside the district and residency, well, that may not be an issue for somebody, who knows?
That's right.
So let's just.
Great point.
Wide open.
Great point. As I already alluded to, I'll help you with that community forum, and those presentations are a nice step in the process. And then just a matter of selecting who you think is the best fit as your next superintendent, offering that position, and then making sure those contract negotiations occur, and hammering out a date when you're going to appoint that person, and get ready to make that transition. Nothing to it, right?
Yeah. Piece of cake, we're already there.
Okay.
That's right.
Take both.
So, if I can take just a few more minutes, in this packet, I think you need to flip just a lot of information in here that I think is good for you to have at your fingertips. And it's kind of a good guidance document for us. It's the fourth page into the packet. There's a suggested timeline for filling this vacancy. If we shoot for, I know you have another meeting on September 3rd. You know, and again, you can do whatever you want. It's probably a little too aggressive to think that you'll have this ready to go for approval at your September 3rd meeting, especially against.
You said time's on our side, so.
It is. It really is. And with the opening of school and such, I think if you shoot for that September 17th date, you have another board meeting on your calendar for September 17th, I think that's very reasonable to have this ready to go. I would be surprised if you had a lot of substantial changes. Maybe you will, but I'm guessing there was a lot of care given to putting this together the last time, and it's a great template to work from. We just want to make sure that it's current, right? So if we shoot for September 17th for having the brochure approved, then that next week, we can have that announcement printed, I say printed, and sent out, right? So it's ready for digital print, and we can get it out to all the avenues that we discussed. And then you're kind of officially posted during that week of the 23rd of September. If we give it 6 weeks, that means that Friday, November 1st would be the end of that application period. That gives a couple of weeks for me to do the screening interviews with folks. And you have a board meeting if we want to try to line up the times when I come to meet with you all with your already scheduled board meetings, so that you're not, you know, driving yourselves too crazy with your own personal schedule. On November 19th, we can spend some time together, maybe after your normal business meeting, and look at the candidates, and you can decide who you want to bring in for a first interview. And then we can start to choose, are we looking at the week of December 2nd or the week of December 9th, or a little combination of both to bring in those candidates for the initial interview. We can wait until after the holidays to get the finalists in, either the week of January 6th or January 13th. Do the community forum the week of January 20th. And then that whatever night you have that forum, you're coming together in this boardroom and making a decision. So by the end of January, you could have a decision made with a very reasonable time frame here. And you can see we could accelerate things if you wanted to, right? So you could, nope, we're going to do the initial interviews the week of December 2nd. We're going to try to fit in the finalists before Christmas time. You could do it. I don't know what you gain by that, but that's your decision to make, right? But I think we have a really nice schedule here. You give yourself about a month. I don't think you'll need a month, but you got about a month to do contract negotiations, have all the resolution information for Corey nice and tight, and February 18th, theoretically, you could be appointing your next superintendent at that February board meeting. And you know what it looks like moving forward, right? You're not too early in the budget process, so again, as far as transition is concerned, you could have that person participate. So that's kind of to me a nice tentative timeline for how we make that happen. So,
Like Dr. McDonald just said, that gives us a good idea of how many candidates we have mid-November to know if you have to go back out.
100%.
Worst case scenario. So
Absolutely true.
I like this schedule. What I'd like to see, if you're selected, of course, in about 10 minutes, is our communication timeframe. These are, in my opinion, these are excellent dates. They're well thought out. I want to build a communication plan for when we actually push out data to the community so that we do make sure they're engaged.
Sure.
And that they feel like they're through the process. If we're going to be that tight with deadlines and stuff like that, I don't see why we can't mirror that with a communication plan.
Yep.
That people will know, here's when we're going to be regularly pushing out information to you. Just my opinion. I just think it's, if you leave it to me, sometimes I would be like, a little more, make sure you push to make sure that communication happens.
And I actually skipped over, you can see toward the top, we got that community survey or thought exchange of desired characteristics pushed out the week of September 30th. So that, again, that's plenty of time. You give a couple of weeks for people to respond to that survey.
Yep.
And it's plenty of time before we come back together where you're using that information and screening, the documents that you receive. Using that input from your community. I'm happy to come back at some point in there and do a presentation and say, hey, this is what your community, right? Let's make it very public.
Yep.
This is what your community said they're interested in,
Yeah,
right? It doesn't have to be a slide of a paper on the QT, right? We wouldn't want that. Put it right out there and say, hey, look at this is what it looks like. And to your point, Graydon, we can build in some of those other communications.
I just think the more open the better. And I want to make sure that we're not comfortable and are communicating amongst ourselves, but then if someone's not watching this or we don't have an active role in pushing it out, I think that's why we've been very successful with our budget votes, for example. We're very transparent how we build it and why. So do the same thing with a candidate, make sure we have the proper communications out. So like that community survey or thought exchange, we would say that would push out the week of September 30th. We would have the results back by this date, and then we would have a presentation at this date that explains all that and where the community and input was, right?
Absolutely.
So I think something like that, a communication plan to mirror that would be excellent, just to keep us on track.
The only concern that I have with the schedule is when we add on to the board meetings, I'm a big fan of not adding meetings, but there comes a point that meeting gets long enough in the day, or I'll speak for myself, my day gets long enough that at the end of we get late into the meeting, I'm not giving it 100% anymore. So, I mean, that's the only thing that I would say is it worth conversation on, do you pick another night just for the superintendent search topic? We can discuss that later, I guess, but it's one of those things that, are we better off picking a night that, like we do our workshop, that is it? Coming in here at 5:30, to have that discussion, when that is done, leave for so you're
So I think
a little fresher.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think a combination of both would be nice. I mean, if we can maximize the days we're already here, and
Right.
it looks like it's gonna be a light agenda and or what the message that's gonna be delivered to us is gonna be short, would be great. If like that community survey and thought exchange is big enough and there's enough topics right there to dedicate to just that, do that. So I think we just might just be nimble about that, right? And as we work through it, say, this either will take more time than a board night or not.
So I will tell you, to your point, that the meeting to select the initial candidates and be prepared with questions and such for that first round of interviews will be a lengthy meeting. You'll need probably 2.5 hours of time.
So that's dedicated.
And so you may want a separate night than that November 19th board meeting. But I think it's still helpful to know that you're going to be together on the 19th. And then where do you want to fit another meeting kind of around that time of the year, right?
Right.
That time of the month, if you will. So yeah, happy to coordinate on that, and it really might help you to be a little bit more focused. Because it can be a push sometimes with boards.
And it comes again too, if we only get 2-3 applicants or we get 15,
Absolutely.
that's gonna change
Right.
everything.
Absolutely true.
But like on the flyer, last time we got quite a discussion on the flyer, but it had been we've had multiple topics discussed last time,
Right.
which we're in a much better situation this time. But I'm just saying, some of those things can, next thing you know, you've ate up a lot of night
Yeah.
discussing, and you know, that, just,
So with that pamphlet specifically, I would say that you have to update all the financial pieces, like the obvious things have to be updated. Anything that's obvious financial wise, where our plans are, capital projects, any of those kind of things, like have those updated and then probably have us critique it. So I would almost say take a shot at revamping that without us type scenario, and then we can look at it and give feedback on that. So I don't think we need to sit here and say, hey, that financial is wrong, like update this, update some of that stuff.
So just a question about the community survey, you mentioned community will have input on the questions that are asked at the finals forum.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that through that first survey, or is there?
It's not, it's a separate
It'll be
survey.
a separate
Yeah,
one?
and we usually push that out. If I look at this calendar, you know, that would probably be like early January. You know, right when folks come back to school after the holidays, get that pushed out, leave it open for about a week, has been enough. And we've watched, like, when the hits come in, right when we push out, hey, there's a survey, people participate. We send a reminder, people participate. After that, don't see any action really. And so I don't think we need to leave it out there for, you know, 2 to 3 weeks would be, in my opinion, unnecessary. We'll have it ready to go though for that community forum sometime the week of January 20th without a problem. So separate survey, got some canned questions, right? I think there's, we've had as many as 50. I've had boards say, get it down to 25, right? And so there's a lot of repetition as well, that, you know, things that kind of get at the same point.
Right.
And it's always interesting too, to once the candidates start talking, to see what direction they go in with some of these questions, right? They're open-ended enough that that you can get a lot of latitude. So yeah.
And then just logistically with the interviews, what time are those typically?
So
During the day? Is
they're
that-
usually in the evening,
In the
because
evening?
that's
Okay.
when you all are most available from your you know, whatever you do during the day normally. So yeah, they're usually in the evening. And you know, so we've done 3 in one night is probably about the max if you're going to start around 5 o'clock, 5:30. Give people an hour, right? With a little bit of transition time in between. Usually a board tries to grab a quick bite to eat, something easy, just, you know, keep moving. And you're wrapping up though, if you know, do the math on that, it's 8:30, 8:45, 9 o'clock when you're done. So if you've got, you know, 6 candidates that you want to bring in that first round, you're doing that over a couple of nights. You know, try to do like back-to-back nights, or, you know, 2 out of 3 nights. That's the busyness of this.
Right.
And, it's really hard to know. It's hard to predict without knowing what that candidate pool is going to look like. That's usually what we do. I mean, if you guys want to start at noon someday and blow through all of them, you can do that too. It's really up to you as to how you want to structure it and how you can make this work well. So.
it's also, when we did the last one, it was interesting to see, as the day went on with the candidates too. Just, especially if they weren't a setting superintendent, to see just how they handled the length of the day.
Sure. Absolutely true.
They're not all 9 to noon, how much?
No, sir.
You know, the finalists, obviously, the dinner interviews, it's just one person that evening, right? So you're bringing them in at like kind of the normal dinner time, quote unquote normal, right? Dinner time, and then usually having dinner, and then following up with some questions afterwards. And that process is probably a 2-hour, 2.5 max, you know, process with dinner. It will go, as we've already discussed, a little smoother being in here. There's not so much wait time and interruption. So, but if you think about a 2-hour evening, so again, whatever time you get here at 6 in a normal board meeting, you'd be done by 8. You know, second night's going to take a little longer, maybe. Might be very, 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 very clear about how you feel about people. You're not making a final decision, obviously, till after the forum. But boards typically like to have a little bit of conversation, right? What are we feeling right now? What do we want to look for from the survey data, right? So But you might spend a little bit more time that second night. But generally, that's about what it looks like.
And the decision is made after the forum on that.
And it's, yeah, it's go time.
You don't get to go home until it's made.
Yeah. Decision's made after the forum.
Right.
And so, yeah, and that will take us as long as it needs to, right? In some cases, it's been pretty quick. Other cases, it's been quite a bit of deliberation. So, really, the rest of this packet, honestly, is more of just like check and balance. You know, it's just kind of a list of the types of things that we want to make sure are represented in the brochure. You know, much of it is material that we've already talked about, right? Establishing that salary range, which I would really encourage you, if you're not going to do that tonight, maybe at your September 3rd meeting, you can have a little bit of dialogue and discussion around what we need to populate in the brochure. And ideally, I'll come back on the 17th. We can fine tune and look at like a final draft version of the brochure. And if it's good to go, then you know, you all could authorize it that night and we're off and running. Right, so so much of the brochure we can do, to your earlier point, in the background, but some of those bigger decisions that you all have to make as a board, we need to do.
Yeah, I would expect us to set the salary range on September 3rd. Great.
That would be helpful. Again, I just to set the table, I pre-populated. I'm on what's labeled page number 3 at the bottom, and you can just see that you're going to want to specify the length of the contract, that first contract. It's typically no fewer than 3 years. Statutorily, it can't be any more than 5, right? Recommendation would be to say a 3-year contract for that first contract. You can always extend it for somebody, right? But my recommendation would be that 3 years. We know that we're shooting for a July 1 target date. I put that language that I've already cited around residency out there just so you can have it as a reminder, right? So again, you can see it's just a lot of kind of check the box items, mostly for you all, so that you can say, what did he say about this? It's in this packet, right? And I don't want to belabor the point with going literally line by line and through every one of these things. I think we've hit what's really important for your consideration this evening, and hopefully you have a good sense of what the process will look like and feel like. But we'll never know for sure until we get some applications from people. Is there any other information that you need from me at this point?
The fringe benefits listed here?
Yeah.
Do you have examples or?
No, not really. It's
Okay.
it's just there just in case there is you know, something that a board feels passionately about, right? I don't think this will be the case with you, but sometimes a board got burned on something that was in a contract, or they have a pretty sweet deal, right? That's just kind of been like an important piece of what they've often offered their superintendent, but no, not really. It's usually just general language around, you know, a solid benefits package, right? So health insurance, and there's dental insurance, you know, just put that information out there for people so they're not left to wonder. It's kind of commonplace now, though, of course, right?
We'll give him Mike's truck.
It's a Ford, why would we do that?
Ouch.
I thought we were gonna wipe the new paint.
I just got it for it. My feelings are kind of hurt now.
I don't know.
Just surrounded by, you know, some of these guys.
Chevys.
Got Jeep over there, we got
I
GMC.
got you,
Chevy.
okay. I got you.
So I think if, you know, if we'll have more time to obviously go back and forth. There's a lot to digest. I just, everybody take your time, go through the packets, and they're very thorough. You know, it's very similar to the last one we went through, so that's my comfort level with it. It's very similar.
Looking at the brochure, it's pretty much, I mean, we just had to change a couple numbers and a couple dates and stuff like that, and it's
Yeah,
pretty
I
much
thought-
ready to rock and roll.
Some of the things I found is highlight the new campus,
Yeah.
new pictures of things like that, update some of that stuff, because, you know, when we were going out for that initial search, you know, none of the capital projects were done. You
Yep.
had roofs that were leaking, we had things in all sorts of areas. We have a sound foundation right now, and we have someone that's retiring happily, so.
Yeah, that makes it,
We're in a whole different
Yeah.
ballgame, so,
Yes.
we wanna be able to, hit on those high points and show that this is an opportunity to either start a career here or continue a career and grow, so.
Yeah, 'cause that's probably one of their first questions is why is the superintendent leaving? I mean, after only being here for a short time, that's one of their first questions, so we need to
Well,
highlight.
you
there's a
gotta
reason.
tag on the other 17 years
Yep.
before I left.
Well, no, I'm just saying, they're gonna
So
see.
you're covered, no problem.
Yeah,
And we could put that right in the brochure, right? The board's, in nicer words, the board's in search of a new superintendent because of the retirement of.
yeah.
Okay,
After serving the district.
21 years of service to the
20
district
years.
Yeah.
in multiple capacities, right? I think that speaks really well to
We also say
longevity and.
If we got no applicants, he stays for another 2 years.
I'll leave that up to you
You
guys.
gonna work that in there?
Only if he gets a new Ford. Do we have any more questions? I mean, we'll have some time to
Yeah,
be
it's
able
gonna
to,
be a long
review
process.
stuff and then we'll have those discussions. Great.
All right.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I'm just gonna grab my thumb drive out of the computer here. We should be good.
Okay, so before he leaves, would anyone like to make a motion to select Mike Grillo from our DCMO BOCES as our search consultant?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion on that?
Just to reiterate what you had already mentioned, when we went through this process not too long ago, it was a good process, so I'm very comfortable with this process versus what some of the things we've looked at and done in the past, so
I love the support of the BOCES coming down here because they work with our superintendent just as much as we do. So there's that relationship that's automatically built through this process. I'd like that. Gives a comfort level on our regional aspect as well as our local aspect, so. Do we have a second on that?
Kevin, second.
Motion, second, thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is carried. Welcome aboard, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Mike.
it.
Yeah, look forward to seeing you all again soon. Have a good night.
Okay, no one's here for public comment. So we are up to discussion items. We do have quite a bit on discussion tonight, so we conducted the building walkthrough last night. Would anyone like to lead a report on that? Down.
Well, we hit all three facilities, with our walkthrough. Kevin, you weren't here last night.
Apologies.
We did do an add-on for painting of the other rooms at Townsend, something we highlighted last night that Ethan will talk about later. We're getting close. O&M is doing their final cleanings. We are gonna be very close, if not, needing to hit some areas into the fall, potentially. That's catch up, some of the hallways, some various, places. For the deep clean, it's been a rough summer as far as getting through the building, and some of it is for staffing reasons, timing reasons, name it. But, they're doing a nice job, they're doing a nice deep clean. Construction-wise, Ethan will talk about here in a little bit, so we can skip that whole thing.
Okay.
And over here, do we have anything to highlight as far as issues? We had some of the issues from our priority areas to review that are under consideration to be addressed. Some of the structural concerns, we have a structural engineer, we'll have a proposal coming forward at the next meeting from our engineer group. They'll be on site by mid-September to do some of the structural areas that we've identified, so we can get an idea on those. So we hit on some of those areas last night, but talked a lot about lockers and various things that we have as needs, locker rooms, auditorium, discuss auditorium, some of our high priority items coming up.
So we are opening on time, ready to go. We're on phase 2 of Townsend, so there is still construction gonna be active, just like last year. But when we did the walkthrough, they have things corridored off for construction workers separating from student contact, as well as emergency egresses have all been worked out and thought about. We also mentioned, it was mentioned to us that Rick Shaw's coming down to do a final inspection, health and safety inspection of Townsend to make sure that that's ready to go. So
We're doing 2. doing one actually when we turn it over before we do final cleaning, and then we'll have them come back again. We have them on an unannounced need. They can stop in at any point in time and do a spot check to make sure that we're doing everything as safe and upper quality as we can. And it works out well because Rick travels through Downsville on his way home, so he just hops in unannounced and monitors the building and makes sure everything's where it needs to be.
You also mentioned the BCS as well.
Correct.
That was being updated, right, the cost for those.
Yeah, the priority list that was built off, 5-year plan, it was built off of the BCS for the capital project. There's a number of items for those on the facilities committee. You recall, we kind of paused because we had some big ticket items that we had to have the engineers and architects put costs through. We've given them a deadline of November to get on site. We're gonna schedule a facilities committee, either mid to late November, early December, somewhere right in there. We're gonna go ahead and get that coordinated. Now, of course, depending on what we just heard, we'll dance around that a little bit, so we don't overwhelm, but we're giving them that cost. So the proposal will be coming next week. Dan and the engineers will be on site mid-September doing that work. And those are some big ticket items. You know, we have to know the structural items. We have to know more details on the bus garage and what the needs are there as far as, you know, off that bus feasibility study. Is it just the roof that needs to be raised? Is it the walls need to be changed? It's a whole different ballgame. So we've given some strict direction, and so we can get those costs updated. So in the next meeting we come back to, we'll have a completed plan with costs, and then we can start reevaluating the priority list. The other thing that occurred was Brett Wood, when he came, he used his previous knowledge, and so, you know, another set of eyes, went through the BCS, and he had a whole list of other items that they necessarily either didn't review or didn't catch in conversation prior when they were here, of things that are end of useful life and various things, or they're underneath the umbrella of priority items in the list that we didn't know were being addressed. So we've spent last month at meetings every 2 weeks. Well, it was 2 months. Every 2 weeks going through those items with questions from Dan on Brett's list, so we can make sure we have the most updated list of needs to make this next project from. And there was Brett, he bought quite a few things for it, so it was an excellent to have a nice fresh set of eyes, somebody who was an assistant maintenance mechanic prior to exiting, so he came in with a whole other set of knowledge and applied it. So I think that's it. We can go on and on with this one. No?
Okay, policy committee met on July 16th. Kevin, want to report out on that one?
That was like a lifetime ago.
It was a while ago.
I can get the report out.
Okay.
Yeah, so the meeting minutes are in at the link there. So we received the updated policies based on the NISBA policy service. Those were all legal updates related to student records, privacy, and graduation. Those are actually on the agenda tonight for first reading. We have the communication system plan regulation that we talked about being developed. That's currently, based on the draft communication plan that Dr. McDowell has assembled, that's being revised. So that'll come eventually. And we did receive, I guess, another policy update since that meeting.
Then.
And the administration is currently reviewing that, and legal is reviewing some of those policies as well, so.
Right, we did bring one of those policies forward for first reading.
First reading tonight, okay. The administration has also prepared the graduation ceremony regulation. So that's available for review. Of course, that's not for approval, but sort of captures the whole process to get it finally on paper, which we did not have previously.
Yep, if anybody has any questions, we can respond to any of those.
And then, and then updating the 2250 board committee policy, which is just listing our standing committees. That's the only update. Then most of the meeting was actually talking about the policy committee charter, which we had some really good discussion on. Talked about the various roles. We added a role for as a committee liaison. Basically that person who would not be the facilitator of the committee meetings, but would be the one who is the board contact and report back to the board on the issues. I feel like we have the draft charter in a pretty good place now. And it's actually attached as a draft for the board to review. One thing I think that came out of the discussions is pretty clear is while the policy committee charter will be a good template for the other committees, it's not just something that you can just take and fit it into another committee, because there's going to be various roles that have to be discussed, and it's going to be adapted to each committee. And the committee charter will go through the full board review before it's finalized. Then we also talked about each of the committees, when they develop those charters, those drafts will come through the policy committee for review before they go to the board for final approval. We also talked about the shared services committee, which I think we're going to talk a bit more about
Next.
tonight.
Yep.
And then the policy review process, which we're trying to get everything on a 5-year cycle where we get through all the policies in 5 years, and Corey's going through the process of, she has a spreadsheet identifying what are those critical policies that we need to review on an annual basis, and how many can we actually get through in a year. Anything I missed?
I don't think so.
Thank you, Kevin. So next we'll have just a quick discussion on who would like to serve on the Shared Services Committee to meet initially with Downsville Central School District this fall. And that Shared Service Committee, we believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, is beyond just the athletics. It's shared services. And I think with any other school districts around here, 5-10 years down the road, you want to have something in place where you're actually communicating on, is there band opportunities? Are there other facilities opportunities? Are there teaching, any of those kind of shared services? We want to be able to have a collaborative group that's dedicated to that, to work with any of the schools around us. So if, anybody around us wants to join on, form their own committee, this would be the one that would meet with them. So we'll start with Downsville this fall, and we'd like to have up to three representatives. Last time it was myself, who else was on that? Rhonda and, yeah, so that was the 3 last time. I would like to serve on that committee, so if everyone's okay with that, I would like to be one of them.
I'll throw my head back in there.
Okay.
No.
Is everyone comfortable with us 3 being on that committee?
I had interest as well, but
Okay. I mean, I don't know how we make that selection, but it's up to everybody. Yeah, if everyone's comfortable. I know we can't have 4 because it ends up being 4 and 4. So we usually have to have 3.
That'll be appointed
Yeah.
in September.
Okay. All right. Well, we will figure that out there. So we have at least 4 interested, so that's good. We'll schedule a curriculum committee meeting once we've received the New York State assessment data. So one is not scheduled yet, but that'll be forthcoming. The audit committee will meet on Tuesday, October 1st to review the external audit reports. Chip Clark's going to be here. He also represents the board that evening. So we usually get that pre-meeting just before the board meeting. We go through the findings, and then that's actually presented to the whole board as well in detail that night. So a little redundant for some of us, but it gives us a chance to go through it in detail.
So usually like at 5.
It's earlier.
I think about 5 or 4:30.
4:30. We usually set it on Sandy's set schedule, whatever Sandy's comfortable with. Thank goodness she's willing to serve on that. That audit committee is also going to have another meeting this fall to audit random selection of the claims auditor reports. So we have to get together and we get a stack of auditor reports like this, claims internal, and we get to review those. I know a lot of boards, not necessarily a school board, but a lot of boards on municipal levels in the past have been chapped for not doing stuff like that, to actually get it eyes on internal audits and what your auditor's doing. So that is there, and that drives a lot of good discussion. We start seeing that, those papers. So we will have to do that random selection sometime this fall as well with the same committee. All staff's opening is Tuesday, September 3rd. Board members are welcome to attend the auditorium. It starts at 8:30 a.m. So if anyone's interested, be here September 3rd, the auditorium. We still have some openings from the following committees. If any board members are interested, we can make these appointments at our next meeting. The Finance Committee still has an opening. District Safety Committee, in person preferred, but we can do a remote option for monthly meetings. So let's just start out. Is anybody interested in being on the Finance Committee? We have one spot there, Corey, open.
Correct.
So is anyone interested in serving on the Finance Committee to make that third spot for us?
I would do that if nobody else is, or if somebody else is. Who do you have on the committee now?
Let's do.
Okay. District Safety Committee, we just need one board member typically.
So
Right.
last meeting I had expressed interest in
Right.
that, but
Yep.
is that in addition to?
Oh, that's the same one. I thought that you had expressed interest in that.
Okay.
So, does anybody else?
I am
You would
too,
ask-
if just in case.
Okay.
You had asked
Too much.
about remote.
Yeah, if you can, I don't have to be on it, but if you can do in person and that's easier,
Yeah.
then that's,
It's just the topics, depending on what it is, we
Yeah.
don't necessarily want to be voting out, so most of them. would be
I thought we had two, I thought there were two.
There were
Can
two.
have
You
two.
can.
Yep.
Sometimes we just
Okay.
have one.
I would have no problem having both of you.
And it's attend as you can.
Maybe have two.
Okay.
They're scheduled monthly, but the agenda, we don't meet to meet.
Right, if there's something else going on, we don't.
I don't meet just to meet, so if there's not a legitimate agenda, then we bypass the month. So,
Okay, so we can have two appointed at the next meeting. Audit Committee generally meet twice a year again. Maximum of 3 board members, myself and Tammy are on that, as well as Sandy Gregory. We can have a third board member if we'd like to do that. We could also hold a spot for a person potentially
We have
coming
a
in.
new board member.
Yeah, we have a.
Potentially, so we can hold on that if we want to and discuss that.
Okay.
And finally, we had the NISBA annual meeting, voting delegate and alternate. We should appoint a delegate and alternate so that Corey can process the registration for the October 10th virtual meeting at 4 p.m., which is, they have a manual or a mandatory virtual training. Basically, they operated it as a open webinar. So how you would be selected, how you click in to vote, things like that. They have to go through that training. So we have to appoint those. Anyone interested in being the delegate and alternate for the NISBA meeting, annual meeting?
I'll be the delegate.
Okay. Alternate? I'll be the alternate, but you better be there. I'm just smiling, you said you want to be the delegate, so I would be the alternate.
Okay.
It better be
No
extenuating circumstances. After the last 2 years,
They're supposed to improve the process.
I'm hoping they do for you. I'm hoping they do for you. Because at midnight or so last year, when they were saying, please, nobody else drop off, because we have a quorum, that was getting old. Thank you, Kevin. Okay, that's all the discussion pieces we have tonight. Okay, correspondence. You saw in your packet, you had the class of 2024 graduation thank you note in our packets. The district received a conflict of interest form from our school business manager, who serves as a director on board member for Wayne Bank. So this is being publicly disclosed in accordance with our policy 2160. Any other correspondence?
No.
No. Okay, new agenda items.
We did make a couple of changes today. So consent agenda I, personnel appointments, we made a couple of adjustments to the advisors. Middle school student council advisor will just be Bryn Hoover Day. It will not be a co-advisor position this year. And the 5th grade chairperson will be Judy Ogden. So we made those adjustments today. And we also made an adjustment to new business item P, personnel appointments. We have a couple of competitive civil service appointments, and it was a little confusing. So for the second appointment, payroll coordinator filled with a senior account clerk, that is permanent, serving 26 weeks, and that it will be a position change, and this is all just timing. We did consult with civil service on that. And then the only other thing, I did receive a resignation letter from Mr. Budani today, effective today.
That's on our new, that'll be on our new business.
That will be
Additional.
a new business item, correct? And I'll have to do that by paper.
Okay, up to presentations, construction status update.
Evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Hi.
So as Dr. McDonald and Graydon mentioned earlier today, construction still obviously in progress over at Townsend. Did our walkthrough yesterday. Ceiling construction on the first floor will be completed by Friday. We're going to start dropping ceiling tile tomorrow, and we'll be performing painting in the classrooms downstairs, patching and painting throughout in the areas of the first floor. Right now, we have our final clean scheduled for the 27th. That'll consist of a professional cleaning service coming in at the cost of the general contractor, which is part of our project documents, to perform a thorough clean of the first floor to our standard and rickshaw standard. And following that, second floor construction is going to continue until right now we're estimating November 24th. So, anyone have any questions related to anything specific? We're in good shape here. So.
Is everyone good with the updates the way we receive them? I like it because you got a lot of photos in them, timelines, so I think you keep us well informed, but I know the general public doesn't see those, but hopefully admin does, and I appreciate those updates, they're thorough, so.
Yeah, very good, glad to hear that. Is there another communication that's going to be going out to public? Or there, you mentioned, Corey, like a welcome back type of.
That was for our staff.
Oh, for staff.
Yes,
Yeah, for opening day.
Is there a deadline for that? Is that just?
as soon as you can.
Oh, yeah. Would you like a write-up of some sort of?
Pictures, I think.
Yeah, and we got access to the drive.
Yes.
That came through, so
Very good.
just add anything else that you have, so we'll pick them for the opening day slides.
Very good.
And we're on schedule,
Yes.
on budget,
On budget, yes. Yeah.
and we have extra classrooms being painted, as per
Yes.
Kevin last year.
Yeah. So we've been reconciling financials periodically, myself and Meg and the design team as well against their fund summary. So we're tracking costs that we incurred in the phase 1, since we really have a mirror image on the phase 2 side. So we've accounted for the costs of those known costs, and we're also going to be looking at prioritizing some extra items that we'd like to do, provided we have enough cushion in the budget. We're still looking at a pretty decent surplus of funds against our construction contingency, as well as our remaining allowance balances for our asbestos abatement contractors. They had a $50,000 allowance, which we didn't touch any of, so that's a credit back to the district. And I expect we'll have other allowance monies remaining as well.
Did we have a list of secondary priorities that we could not get to with this project, that would be prioritized?
I'm currently working on them.
Okay, are we gonna see that?
If you'd like.
Yeah.
Present that.
Because I know, like, I'm not saying this is true, but AC units, like the upgrade of AC units, things like that, we had some alternatives, I thought, in there, didn't.
So we did accept the alternate for the unit ventilators in the classrooms.
Yep.
So, yeah, that was for the second floor.
Because, room conditioning over there is a hot topic, no pun intended, from the state all the way down through. So, if we have, while everything literally is wide open, the soup can's upside down, wide open, if
Now's
we
the time to
have
do it.
the ability to make any upgrades in those areas, to be proactive rather than reactive, I think now's the time.
Right now, I'm tracking with Brett Wood, replacement of control valves, controllers for unit ventilators and other various mechanical infrastructure on the second floor. That's another big priority item for us. Apart from, we're tracking some additional finishes we may want to do, additional painting, additional ceiling replacements within the work area.
Yep. And again, while we're in Townsend, it ought to be looked at, priority areas ought to be looked at. That's just my opinion, but I know once you pull out of a project and you have a project in middle school, it's not like we can go back over to Townsend. So if there's outstanding issues that are high priority over there, we should see what those are and be able to make decisions on those.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
At the completion of the project, are we thinking another open house like we did last year?
We can,
Yeah.
we can. We haven't really talked about it here. But we had probably, half dozen people, I think. showed
Yeah,
up
hey,
there.
it went well though.
Yeah.
The gist of it went well
Yeah.
publicly.
So we'll come up with another date, push that out a couple weeks before it's ready and sure.
We'll need some new white gloves though.
I still think the general public would be absolutely amazed if they looked in there and saw what we see, which is from deck to roof, wide open, is Townsend, and doing it twice, back-to-back years. Pretty substantial amount of work, so appreciate you keeping everything on schedule for us. That's been great, thank you.
So we're looking after our final clean to turn over to O&M on the 28th for their clean, and then moving back rooms the 30th. So.
Great.
Thanks,
Down
everyone.
to the wire.
See you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you don't have to stick around if you don't want to.
Oh, okay.
You work hard enough.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next we have fiscal update.
Just a couple things I wanted to touch on while we're talking about capital projects. In the fall of 2020, we had a capital project vote for an $8,214,000 project that was done over 2 years. That included the roof on this building, lighting upgrades, the parking lot project, removing of the fuel tank accounts, and a lot of different things. We finally wrapped up the paperwork related to that this past June. Our total cost came in at $8,173,000, so about $40,000 under the total budget, which I can think of off the top of my head, 2 pretty significant things that happened that we didn't anticipate at the beginning of that project. So coming in under budget is pretty remarkable. The first being that when we originally designed the project, we didn't think we'd do a complete tear off of this roof, but we did, which was significantly more expensive. And then the second thing that changed during the project was the additional work we did related to stormwater, as we did the parking lot and the driveway project. So to come in under budget with that additional work, I think is pretty amazing. In addition, we were able to receive $532,199 from CWC to help offset the costs related to the stormwater work we did. So we issued the final bonds through the Dormitory Authority in June. And we had to issue $5,885,000 to finance the project. So the difference between the cost and that amount is the CWC money and amounts we've been able to pay down during construction. That'll be paid off over the next 15 years with the final payment in 2038. The second thing I wanted to touch on was the memo that I sent out regarding the closing of the books for 23-24. I just want to pull that up. As you may recall, the last time, we talk about this a lot during budget time, and the last time we talked about it was in February, where I gave you my projection for the year end, and I thought what I said to you was that my best estimate was we'd end up somewhere around a $500,000 deficit, but we actually ended up with a $500,000 surplus. I am admittedly fiscally conservative. At the same time, I don't want to be, the boy who cried wolf. As I tried to express in the memo, I outlined some things that contributed to things turning out better than we anticipated. Since the beginning of the year, or even late last year, it was suspected that interest rates would decrease. They didn't. Throughout this year, we earned about $400,000 in interest income this year alone, compared to a budget of, I think, $15,000. So that's one area where we had significant savings. Another one is with some of our special ed placements and services. Mid-year changes to a single student can change costs by $150,000. In addition, there were some expenses anticipated related to facilities that didn't happen, and health insurance costs, particularly related to our health reimbursement arrangement with our employees, were under what was expected. So, and also in finalizing the capital project, we had about $150,000 of funds that we were able to put to the general fund when we closed that out. So there were a variety of things that made the situation better this year. I don't think this means we're out of the woods. I'll remind you that the year before we did have a slight deficit, and that some of these things that happened last year aren't guaranteed, or we know absolutely won't happen next year. So it's important that as we move forward, we continue to be, conscientious about our expenses increasing and our revenues being somewhat limited. Along with that memo, I also sent you some information on our federal grants. We recently got our allocations for the grants that we get every year, and our allocations are decreased by $80,000 for this coming year. So that's funds that were previously covered, it's mostly salaries that were previously covered by these grants that will now have to be shifted into the general fund. I've done some work to try and figure out exactly why, like what's driving it to go down, and I think it has to do with a poverty factor, and I've traded phone calls with a lady who's supposed to be able to give me some insight, but we have not yet been able to. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
So Meg, I guess based on those results, do you see any process improvements that could be put in place to get us closer to numbers?
I don't
I
really
realize
think
it's a
there are. I mean,
guessing
how do
game,
you
there's so many-
how do you project what insurance costs people, what services, what surgeries, what cancer diagnoses are going to happen as a result of these things? I mean, we can look at history, what's happened in prior years.
Right.
At the same time, we can't predict when a BOCES placement is going to say we can't serve this student any longer. So there goes $20,000 a month in transportation, and there goes. So I think, are there some things that we can get closer on? Yes, but at the same time, I think there's things that you just don't know. I mean, when the analysts are all saying interest rates are going to go down, interest rates are going to go down, and they don't, it's hard to predict a lot of things.
Was that the largest gap, was the actual interest earned versus projected? Was that the largest difference?
No, because
So
like I
you
said, I
say-
had projected close to 200,000 when we projected in February. So, that was maybe a $200,000 difference.
Okay, so the mid-year, you're comparing your mid-year projection with a total, which is still 203,000. Just by that interest rate staying where it was.
I mean, when monies weren't spent, they were in the bank.
Right. No. I've said this before, I wish the state would follow our lead on some of these things and be as conservative as you can to make sure we're not shocking taxpayers. But again, we have this year, I think now is a good time to have a positive like this happen, because next year we still won't know what the foundation's gonna be driven at. They're recalculating that now, so we don't know what those impacts are gonna be. So if we had to have a year where things were on our side leading into the unknown, I think that the timing is good for these.
I mean, definitely there are results to be pleased with.
Yeah.
But I don't want them to lull us into
Right.
thinking that everything's fine.
The other thing this gives you an example of too is the federal funds and that change, the timing of it. The federal budget, you don't know until now. state budget than our budget is in the spring. So you're literally putting together a budget, voting on a budget, and then you don't know what you're going to get from one of your largest revenue sources. And in this case, it ends up being $75,000 less, 74,699. So, you know, it'd be nice if all these different, you know, fiscal offices could parallel and run the same, but of course they don't. So was this helpful? We hadn't done this before as far as this year-end wrap-up.
I personally, it puts a pin on last year. It gives you an idea of where you're coming into the budgeting process for our finance committee to be able to start looking at these things. Because you're asking a board to make decisions all the time with missing information. That's how it works, unfortunately. Even through the process, the best delayed process, we don't get the final state budget until after April 1st, if you're lucky. So you don't have a lot of pieces you're trying to make decisions on. This really says, here's how we did last year, and in this case, we did better than what was expected last year. You have that going into the starting foundation of your budget cycle. It may take the pressure off some people to say, okay, you know, we're not in dire straits right this second, but now it also lays a framework for how do we continue to be successful like this. And budgeting conservatively is something I like to see. I mean, it's because the last thing you need is, I signed, well, a couple weeks ago, a transportation contract for $250,000. And that's just for that's only three. I mean, so, you know, if you have more needs moving in your district, you can see how fast you can have an issue. So, my hat's off to you for, you know, sometimes we give you a ration about being conservative as you are. It always is to the benefit of the district, and more importantly, it's always to the benefit of the taxpayers, how you operate.
So this will be on the calendar for every August. Get moving forward.
I think it is helpful too, but part of the reason I wanted to do this is I think it's helpful for me to relay it to you sort of in the terms we've talked about, as opposed to waiting until October and hearing it from the auditors as to where the year ended. So I wanted to be able to have us have a conversation, you know, related to budget development and what our conversations have been, as opposed to just the auditor's presentation being the first time you hear about your results.
So this will put us in a better situation with the fund balance, correct? That it will
Absolutely.
likely, because we were looking at going into fiscal stress through the comptroller's calculation, that'll probably push it off at least a year, maybe 2 years.
I'm sure.
Okay. As long as we can achieve the budget that we've passed. So as we look to the next finance committee meeting, what do you think, how do you think we should move the discussion? Like, we should start to work this into the planning tool that we've been developing?
Yeah, I
Is
mean,
that-
you worked hard on a spreadsheet that I think your Excel skills are way above mine. But I think it's important to take a minute and, you know, put it in there and see what our projections are and see, you know, how many years it puts us out and see if our assumptions are reasonable and look at that again. I mean, I think kind of taking a look at where we are and where we think we're going is a good place to start the budget process.
So that'll be the focus for the first committee meeting.
Good.
Sounds good.
All helpful, so this will be every August we get this now. Great. Okay, next on the agenda is our strategic plan update.
So, those of you who were able to be in attendance, I think we had 3 board members, right? Tammy, Jake, and Kevin.
Yep.
Appreciate your time that day. We adjusted the process as we had talked about previously, and we had our board workshop where we set the priority areas, if you recall, and we worked off of those priority areas at our goal objective setting meeting, but we did it by building. In the past 2 years, we did it by priority area. Now we're flipping it back, focusing on it by building, so we get 2 or 3 goals that are manageable, attainable, and in line potentially with any state mandated reports or strategic plans, improvement plans that happen to be out there. So we met and went through the process, broken up by buildings. I think Jake, Kevin, you were in high school, right? Tammy, you were in
Middle school.
middle school. For that, the three principals facilitated the process, trying to keep everybody from going into the how, into the action step, keep them up here for the what. But capturing that data, which was very helpful for the after meeting, the second meeting. So here today, I have what our strategic plan document will look like. This is what will be published. That is our mission, vision, and core values, our priority areas, and then our goal objectives sheets. So by building, for 24-25, I'll just read down through these real quick. Townsend Elementary, increase attendance for Townsend School elementary students, increase the efficiencies of the academic instruction in Tier 1 and Tier 2, and analyze the school environment to focus on parent and student engagement. For Mac Middle, improve communication between middle school and homes, train staff to consistently use school tool and assist parents in understanding how to effectively use school tool, and increase engagement in SEL activities, social emotional learning activities throughout the year. O'Neill High School, increase attendance to reduce the chronic absenteeism rate by at least 10%. Analyze the school environment, identifying opportunities to increase student and parent engagement, and establish a stakeholder group to assess, review, and analyze the components and vision of the Walton O'Neill High School portrait of a graduate. So kind of in line with the state initiative that's coming and is going on this time across the state. So those are the three goals, and action step development has been in process. High school will be completed next week, you're targeting, and they'll be working through those action steps. Where we met today for planning of calendaring and committees and what do we need to do to structure to be successful. And we're not going to lose any momentum with this, because once school starts, you're managing the operation, and if you don't get things in the calendar and get your strategy built, it's going to be hard to establish it. In the plan, November, so the second board meeting in November, we have two in November? We have two, right? The second board meeting in November on the agenda will be the reporting document of all the action steps that the principals will be capturing notes as they're working through it. So it's not going to be a PowerPoint like it was in the past. We have three separate documents, one for each school, and it's just going to be a running document, and you're going to see it as they're progressing. And they'll have a report out and have a conversation, answering questions, and that will be the second meeting in November is the first one of those. Okay? And then we have our trends and targets. And I will say, not that I should, but I will, the preliminary 3 through 8 data is embargoed. They didn't put out the memo today, so I can't talk about exact numbers, but I fringe on the inappropriate sometimes. So I got the preliminary numbers, and I can't leave it alone because it's numbers and it's data. So I put it in our charts and our different things we'll present to you later and look at growth. But then I said, I wonder. So I did our targets, and we already have a problem. You know what the problem is? We outperformed our target in 2 different areas already. What a nice surprise, right? What a nice surprise. So
Yes.
it was math of all places where we've been really struggling in the past. And it was 3-8 and 6-8. We don't have any regions yet. So we'll see what happens with those. So we already have to set new targets, because the 25 performance already beat the target. So I congratulate the administrators. They should be proud. The teachers should be proud. There should be a celebration to be had opening the school. Nice, proud. So we'll bring that forward, and we'll have a draft, kind of a change. We'll bring that chart forward with what we feel should be the new targets, and we'll agree to that at this table when we bring forward the data, and we'll make that adjustment for the 25 targets at that meeting. So we will be scheduling our curriculum committee very soon, because the only thing we're not going to have is our regional data. So it'll probably be the end of September to hopefully get that regional comparison data done. But given that we have it this soon, you know, we have things that we can show and growth that we can look at. We're starting to see some positive movement, which is what we've been waiting for with all the initiatives and the hard work that both our administrators and our teaching staff have been doing. So, good news all the way around.
The thing I would point out too is that this is consistent with the grant, right? These metrics are consistent with the Stronger Connections grant.
Yeah, there's a number of the targets that we had on here from the Stronger Connections grant. So,
Yep.
but the ones that we already blew past, will, as long as we don't decrease them, we increase them, we'll be okay. So yes, yep.
As well as the planning process for the target improvement.
Correct.
What we ended up on the strategic planning is pretty consistent with that, so I think the folks who went through that process, that was helpful for us to receive all those objectives, because it did help to guide the overall district process.
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you for bringing up, I forgot that point. One of the key aspects that we did with strategic planning was we brought forward the targeted review notes and their goals and objectives and action steps for review for the strategic planning teams. And actually, a lot of these goals are in line. I think there's, you know, majority of them are in line with the targeted review. That's something we're talking about today, because, you know, we can do the same actions, but we're gonna have to, you know, disaggregate some of the data and different things like that, so we're talking about targeting that. And the targeted review is on here as well for Google later, down on the agenda. We did receive, the state, it's really interesting. The state doesn't do approval of the target review, but they do a checkbox, that it meets the expectation of what they want, but they don't approve it. Well, you don't hit one of those checkboxes, isn't that a denial? So we did hit it all, and they gave us some feedback, which basically was get out of the gate and get to work, because they want to see some of those reviews and some of the things, and they'll see some of the things that we find implemented during the year. That's the goal. So that's something we're working on today as well, is how do we get after this early, so that if we do find any barriers or any action items that we can then implement, that we can go ahead and implement it in the fall, mid-year. So it's been busy. So that's why I joked earlier, they've seen enough of me here lately, these three on the side, so feel for them. Okay, any questions on that? And again, I really think the process, the way we changed it, is something I really think we've got it chunked nicely now. And we can really focus it down. And I think it takes a little bit of pressure off of you folks, that you set the priority areas as a board. If all of you can't be there, do the commitments for the goal and objective settings, you shouldn't feel bad about that, because you did the heavy lifting. You set the priorities that you want people working toward. And if we can get some 2, 3 people a year, 4 people a year, that's awesome to have in that large group. But I don't think it needs to be a feeling that the whole board has to take personal time and work time off and go into it, because you set the priority areas. So you had your oversight. Okay?
I think the process was really good, and I like the fact that we narrowed it down so that we can focus on each school can have their own focus. And also, to me, it makes it a little more achievable, because just sitting there and seeing all of the goals that were there from last year, I mean, it starts to make you feel a little disheartened, you know, just looking at that, and you're like, wow, I didn't achieve very much or whatever. But I really think that we're setting ourselves up for success this year. And some of the things that I know in the middle school group are things that they work on, and just are making a little more robust maybe. And so I hope that we can be more successful this year. So it was a good process.
Okay. Next on the agenda is our consent agenda. Are there any individual items on the consent agenda that need to be pulled and/or you want discussed as a board? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move it.
Second.
Any further discussion on any of the items? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda is carried. Old business, 10A, appointments of officers and others. Any discussion on that? If not, entertain a motion to approve the appointments.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Any further discussion on that? If not, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those are approved. 10B, award of transportation contract bid and approved contract.
And this retroactive to June 18th, it was the addendum, and it was missed, and I apologize that I did not catch that during the meeting.
Make a motion.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion on that? If not, I there.
Who made the second?
I did.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear.
That's okay. I was quiet.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those are approved. And new business. First, we have to adopt the district-wide safety plan.
I'll move it.
Second.
Motion second. All those, any further discussion on that? All those in favor for adopting the district-wide safety plan signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is adopted. Next, we have to adopt the tax warrant.
I'll move it.
Second.
Motion second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Tax warrant is adopted. Next, we have the approval of 24-25 targeted review for the district comprehensive improvement plan. Any discussion on that? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve it.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Any further discussion on that? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is approved. Next, we have adoption of the 24-25 strategic plan that's just presented.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion on that? Motion. All those in favor of adoption of the strategic plan signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's carried. And fill in the blanks for the motion for designating the voting delegate and alternate.
Kevin Berlinger as delegate, and Braden Dutcher as alternate.
I would make that motion.
Second.
Motion second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Next is a recommendation from our attorney to seek authorization to seek tuition reimbursement.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's carried. And now we have adoption of the revised 2024-2025 school calendar.
It was just a change in a region state
From
from the 4th to the 11th.
Any further discussion on that? If not,
Just when I open this, it doesn't actually.
it's not live.
Doesn't open?
I think it's because it's reading the extension is
Okay.
2024 as well. Is it just?
I was
is-
having a
popped up.
problem,
Oh, it did? Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
I was having a problem when I was
Okay.
uploading it, it kept putting that extension on there, I don't know if I can fix that or not.
So it's just the single page graph?
It's a single page
Yes.
graph.
And the only change was to that June region state.
Okay.
I'll make the motion to accept it.
Second on that?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's changed, carried. Adopt the revised grief response plan.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on that?
That was Mr. Charles and Mr. Demont. Oh,
All those in favor of adopting the revised grief response plan signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Is adopted. And we have 3 extensions separately for transportation contracts.
Make a motion?
Seconded.
Motion by Kevin, second by Kevin.
thank you.
Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I is extended. J is the extension of transportation contract again for a separate company.
Make the motion.
Second.
Motion by Tammy, second by Jake. Any discussion on that? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is extended. And we have another extension of transportation contract.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Motion by Tammy, second by Kevin. Any discussion on that? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's extended. Keep up.
Mhm.
Okay. We're up to L, approved teens count bus transportation.
Make a motion?
Second.
Motion by Kevin, second by Tammy. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's carried. Approval of the virtual school psychologist contract service agreement. I just had one, it's for up to 20 hours per week.
Correct.
Okay.
Make a motion?
Motion by Kevin,
Second.
second by Tammy. Any further discussion on that? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is carried. Next is a creation of payroll coordinating position.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Tammy,
I'll second.
second by Jake. Any discussion on that? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is carried. Up to personnel emergency appointments. I'll move that.
Second?
Motion second by Kevin. Any discussion on that? All of those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?